Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.
Good afternoon. Thank you all very much for coming. I have to tell you a story. I misplaced my glasses the other day. They were around my neck. I went to Colonie Center, went to Barnes & Noble. I came out of Barnes & Noble, a plug for Barnes & Noble, and I couldn't find my car. And I had to push that little red button and have the car yell at me, "I'm over here, stupid." We might be formally introduced before the day is over. I'll remember tomorrow that we've met, but I will have forgotten your name. However, if you are to ask me about the conscious moments that I spent with 4 days in November of 1963, from Friday, when we learned that the man had been shot, until Monday when they buried him, I can tell you with a clarity and a sharpness that borders on spooky everything that happened that weekend. And as I look around this room, I'm convinced most of you know exactly what I'm talking about. The assassination of John Kennedy traumatized at least one full generation of Americans and possibly 1.5 generations of Americans. The World War II generation, what Tom Brokaw affectionately refers to as the greatest generation, of which John Kennedy was part, he was born in 1917, was traumatized by the death of John Kennedy. Half of my generation, I am a boomer, anyone born between January of 46 and the end of 64 is classified as a boomer. Half of my generation, say anybody born before 53, was traumatized by the death, the assassination of John Kennedy. Joe Stalin may or may not have uttered the famous phrase, "One man's death is a tragedy and a million is a statistic." And if that's true, then John Kennedy is proof of that. One man's death is indeed a tragedy. When we met in January and discussed killing Lincoln, I told you at the time, and you may not remember, that there are certain standards that a professional historian has to meet. Two of the most important standards that a professional historian has to meet is research and accuracy. You have to demonstrate where you got, what I used to talk about, the 9th grade Regents exam, show all work. And the second thing is you have to be accurate. And if you don't show all work, and if you are not accurate, you are failing as a professional historian. And I don't care if you sell 2 million copies of anything. And I told you at the time, this was January, that I thought that the book about Lincoln was a failure, primarily because his research was horrible and he made way too many mistakes. I'm reminded of a debate that Ronald Reagan had with Jimmy Carter in 1980 when they were running for president. And Carter would say something, and Reagan would stand up there and he'd bob his head the way he did and said, "Well, there you go again." Well, here we go again. It's 11 months later, and people with a pedigree way, way bigger than mine handed the man his hat about killing Lincoln. So he decided to do killing Kennedy. And he did it the same way with the same results. He's going to sell 2 million copies. And the book is a disaster from a historical standpoint. At least 2/3 of this book has nothing to do with the assassination. Reminds me of going to a used car dealership and bait and switch. Killing Kennedy, the end of Camelot. He starts in 1943 when John Kennedy saves his crew, a PT-109. It's a very famous story. We all know the story. There are lovely maps, lovely pictures, and it has nothing to do with Dallas. There are 29 pages about the Bay of Pigs invasion in April of 1961. Pretty maps, lovely pictures, basically has nothing to do with the assassination. There are at least 50 references in this book. I counted them. My wife says I'm a Victorian, about John Kennedy's sex life. It's salacious. It sells books, and it has nothing to do with the assassination. And it's really, really aggravating. That's all, the only word I can use for you is it is aggravating. It's page 200 of the book before we even get to Dallas. And when we get to Dallas, when we start dealing with the assassination, he starts to make mistakes that would just make a historian of the Kennedy assassination cringe or cry. I can't decide which. There's a whole discussion in here about a young man by the name of Sterling Wood, who supposedly saw Lee Harvey Oswald practicing shooting his rifle about a week before the assassination. And this is just, it's stunning to read this thing. Young Sterling notices a man standing in the shooting booth next to him. He is aiming at a silhouette. The teenager reads a lot of gun books, is pretty sure that the guy is firing an Italian carbine, which is what Oswald used. It appears that the rifle's barrel has been sawed off to make it shorter. Flame leaps from the end of the gun thanks to its shortened length. Now, anyone who knows anything about the Kennedy assassination knows the Mannlicher Carcano rifle that Oswald used was not sawed off. Why does he put this in this book? Well, I'll tell you why. If you're into conspiracy theories, I'll tell you why. John Wilkes Booth, in the days before he shot Abraham Lincoln, longed to be a great man. And just as Booth practiced his marksmanship at a shooting range days before the assassination, so too does Lee Harvey Oswald. No, no, and no. There is no documentation in anything that John Wilkes Booth practiced at a shooting range prior to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. It's a canard. It's a story. And guess where the first time it ever showed up? Killing Lincoln. He uses a canard to substantiate a canard. And this just goes on and on and on. The assassination, okay? Lee Harvey Oswald took the shot. I'm just going to go out on a limb here and tell you he took all 3 shots. And if we're going to argue about that, that's fine. We'll argue about that. But the first thing that Lee Harvey Oswald did after he fired the 3 shots, okay? He drops his now unnecessary Italian carbine, steps from the tower of book boxes behind which he's been hiding, and races to get out of the depository. He dropped nothing. He calmly, coolly got up from the sniper's nest, walked to the stairwell, and stuffed the rifle down between a stack of boxes. It's, after all, a Texas school book depository. He didn't drop anything. Am I being picky? You're damn right I'm being picky. This is a history book. You're supposed to get it right. Dallas motorcycle officer Marion Baker races into the building and up the stairs. He stops Oswald at gunpoint on the 2nd floor, lets him go when it becomes clear that Lee is an employee. How does the cop know this? How does the police officer know this? Because he is accompanied by Roy Truly, the building manager. You cannot possibly discuss Oswald's getaway without including the fact that the officer had him in his sights and truly told him to let him go. Oh, he works here. Don't worry about him. And then they race up the stairs. This is one of the linchpins of the conspiracy theorists that Oswald could not possibly have gotten from the 6th floor to the 2nd floor break room in enough time. It's been proven that he could. But how do you write a book and not include the fact that Truly was with the cop? How do you do that? How do you overlook that? This is common knowledge. This is a field that has been plowed many, many times by many different people. How do you overlook that? You overlook that because it's sloppy. That's all. It's sloppy. When Lee Harvey Oswald was shot, my 13th birthday, that was my 13th birthday present, was Ruby shot Oswald in front of 10 million people. Oswald was buried the following day. They did not waste too much time getting him in the grave. And O'Reilly says on page 290, Jack Ruby set upon by the police. Oswald slumps over, blah, blah, blah. Oswald dies at 1:07 p.m., 48 hours after killing Kennedy. But unlike Kennedy, Oswald is not mourned by anyone. That's not true. That's not true at all. His mother, who is part of his problem, mourned him deeply for years. She was at the cemetery. His wife was at the cemetery with the babies. Not mourned by anyone. It's not true. How do you put this in a book that's supposed to be history? How do you do that? The sorry excuse they have for notes in the back of the book, which is enough to drive you crazy. It's about 7 pages, and they sum up everything, all their research in 7 pages. It's enough to drive you nuts. He talks about Jack Ruby, okay? What happened to Jack Ruby after the assassination? Jack Ruby, incredibly, his conviction is overturned on appeal. Jack Ruby dies a not guilty man. He only shot Oswald in front of 10 million people. He dies of a pulmonary embolism on January 3rd, 1967 at the age of 55. Jack Ruby is buried next to his parents. It's worth noting that Ruby may have known about his aggressive cancer before he shot Oswald. Really? You have access to Jack Ruby's medical records from 1963? This is the first time. This is the first time in 50 years I've ever seen anybody make a statement like that. There's no footnote, no substantiation. I don't have a clue where he gets this idea that Ruby realized he had cancer in 1963 and died in 67. Where does this stuff come up? Where does he come up with this stuff? It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Now, this, if you're ever been an author, I've never been an author, but this would have driven someone crazy. William Manchester wrote a book, Death of a President, written shortly after the assassination, built around first-person interviews with everyone. Manchester's work was written with the complete cooperation of Jackie and the Kennedy family. It was published in 1967. No, it wasn't. She sued him. She took Manchester to court. There was no complete cooperation. Now you're going to make the argument, yeah, she cooperated with him in 63. When that book came out in 67, she wanted the right of first refusal. Manchester told her no, and she sued him. There's whole books written about the book. Okay? Manchester's work was written with the complete cooperation of the Kennedy family. Hardly. Hardly. And yet, he puts it in here. And he's going to sell 2 million copies. Now, the thing that really set me over the edge, that just ruined the whole day, or 2 days, or however long it took me to read this. This is their notes for chapters 23 through 26, which deals exclusively with the assassination. A wide range of websites and books were used to sift through the vast number of facts surrounding the assassination of John Kennedy. The timing, crowd descriptions, arrival scene, all other aspects of the shooting are standard facts. The primary sources for specific conversations, private moments, blah, 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 blah. Medical, and the assassination itself, and of course, the Zapruder film. We watched it time after time to understand the sequence of events, and never gets less horrific, nor did the outcome ever change. This is the only time in a book of over 300 pages that's supposed to deal with the Kennedy assassination that the name Zapruder is mentioned. You cannot, okay, and I'll repeat myself, you cannot discuss the Kennedy assassination in any way, shape, or form with any degree of accuracy without discussing the Zapruder film. It's the greatest piece of home movies ever filmed. It's mentioned here one time. Oh, by the way, we weren't doing much, so we watched the Zapruder film. You think? And yet, he's going to sell 2 million copies. In the final analysis, O'Reilly shoots himself. O'Reilly was interviewed for USA Today. Few history books can approach the popularity of O'Reilly's Killing Lincoln, which has sold more than 2 million copies since it was released a year ago. His new book, Killing Kennedy, about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, could be as popular, goes on sale Tuesday. Its history is fast-paced thriller with dramatic foreshadowing and you are there present tense. O'Reilly says it's all true. Both books were written by Martin Dugard, who did most of the research, leaving the writing to O'Reilly, whose approach is to write, quote, history that's fun to read in a populist way. No pin-headed stuff. Just roar it through. A few historians question details and lack of documentation in Killing Lincoln. O'Reilly, a former high school history teacher, says any errors are picayune. The criticism, he says, is jealousy. These guys toil in obscurity their whole lives, and a punk like me comes along, sells 2 million copies, and they're not happy. O'Reilly closed the interview by saying to the guy from USA Today, I'm a journalistic watchdog and a champion bloviator. I'm not a historian. Not really. That's not my discipline. Well, on that, Mr. O'Reilly and I agree 100%. Thank you very much. Oh, no, I don't expect any questions at all. Go ahead. Oh, come on.
Well, don't you think it was just written for the 2 million
Sure.
copies?
That's exactly why it was written.
Yeah, and the money.
The first, he gives away all the money. He always gives away. Yes, yeah, he gives away the money from the O'Reilly, from the Lincoln Project to his Wounded Warrior Project, and he's going to give away all the profits from this. Well, no, he doesn't need the money, and it makes him feel good. And I'm happy for him. I got no problem with selling a book, but just don't sell it to me as history. Do not sell this to me as history. This is a novel, okay? This is not history. Yes, sir.
What book would you recommend on the assassination?
Well, I knew you'd ask that. I'm going to take care of your summer. And this is only, what, December. This is the out-of-print William Manchester Death of a President. If you can get this, they don't print this anymore because the Kennedys put the kibosh on this baby. If you can get this, this is a superior, superior book. It comes out in '67. It has a lot of the first-person people who were there. You don't get the second generation. You don't get the third generation. If you can get a copy of this, go for it. The second one is a book called Case Closed by Gerald Posner. It came out in 1993. It's very, how do I put this? It's analytical. It goes through everything with a fine-tooth comb, and it proves pretty much, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Oswald did it 3 shots by himself, okay? And it's superbly done. And one of the primary sources of this is the Zapruder film, shocking as that may be to Mr. O'Reilly. Okay? This is a superior book, 93. Then there's this monster. This is Vincent Bugliosi. You know Vincent Bugliosi, the district attorney that prosecuted Charles Manson, helter skelter. It's called Reclaiming History, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And it came out in 2007, and it is a monster. Okay, it's over 1,000 pages. What Bugliosi does that Posner does not is he approaches every one of the conspiracy theories. I'm talking all of them. The Cubans, not the Cubans. Castro, not Castro. The mob. He does every one of them. And he takes them apart. He literally takes them apart. Now, the only caveat I would give you to Bugliosi's book, probably it took him 9 years to write this. He put it aside, came back, put it aside, came back. The only thing I would say is he gets mad. He gets a little Italian going on there. And he does, you have to be careful. He mocks, sometimes he mocks the conspiracy theorists. And it gets a little mean towards the end. I guess he got angry. He got frustrated with all of the madness that's out there. Posner says in the introduction to his book, which is 1993, that there are 2,000 books written about the Kennedy assassination. I was flabbergasted. I had forgotten that. I read this, and then when I decided to do this, I went back and reread Posner's book. It took me a week or two, but in the introduction, he says there's 2,000 books about the Kennedy assassination. And that was in 93. We're talking 20 years later. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? This is a field, as I said, this is a field that's well plowed. Everybody's been down this road and done a lot of different work. And yet, O'Reilly's right. He's going to sell 2 million copies. Bugliosi's book, I bet, didn't sell 100,000, if that. Well, look at this. I mean, you're going to take this off the bookshelf? Only a nut job like me would take this thing off the bookshelf. Right? It's monstrous. His research and indexes are so bad, he has a CD for them. He has a CD for his research. That's how big this thing is. And he takes them apart. There's not a conspiracy theory left standing. With the possible exception, considering the way O'Reilly talked about Kennedy's sex life, that Oswald was a jealous husband, every other conspiracy you ever thought of, Bugliosi addresses it and takes them apart. But I liked Posner's book better. Okay, I like Posner's 1993 book much better than Bugliosi. Sorry, Vinny, what can I tell you? But this is a bear. This took a whole summer to read. This is a bear. Yes, sir.
Why can't people accept the fact that Oswald was...
You're a good man. I knew you'd ask that question.
What was the question?
Why can't people accept the fact that Oswald did it by himself with no one else?
I mean, there's a whole industry around.
There's a cottage industry. I'll tell you two things. I won't mock the people who are conspiracy theorists, unlike Bugliosi. These are honest people. These are honest people that fervently believe whatever aspect of the conspiracy that they happen to be looking at. I was telling him there's a new theory out on the website that the Zapruder film was altered. You know, oh, God bless you. I don't know where some of this stuff comes from, but the provenance on the Zapruder film has been established, and it could never have been altered. It was never out of the grasp of certain people, and we won't get into that. But they look you straight in the eye, straight in the camera, and say, "Well, we all know that the Zapruder film was altered," and it's stunning. But they believe, and you can't argue with that. They believe. They fervently believe. And they've been at it for 50 years. Kennedy's dead 50 years next November. And they started with Mark Lane's book, if you remember, 6 Seconds in Dallas in 1964, Rush to Judgment, where he was mad at the Warren Commission. And it's just been like this for 50 years. I saw a survey the other day, something like less than a third of the population of the United States thinks that Oswald fired the shots. Never mind whether or not he acted alone or whether or not he was assisted, just whether or not he fired the shots. A third. Manchester said the problem is balance. We want balance in our lives. We can't get our hands around the fact that a wretched waif, I love that line, a wretched waif like Oswald could do what he did. And you compare it to Kennedy's life, and it doesn't balance. Now, if you can put a conspiracy with Oswald, maybe you can get some balance. Well, Norman Mailer, who is verbose beyond verbosity, God bless him, he's dead. But he once said, it is virtually not assimilable to our reason that a small, lonely man felled a giant in the midst of his limousines, his legions, his throng, and his security. If such a non-entity destroyed the leader of the most powerful nation on earth, then a world of disproportion engulfs us, and we live in a universe that is absurd. Norman Mailer, okay? I'll take Manchester's theory about balance, but you understand what Mailer's saying in his own inimitable way. And you can't, these people cannot get it around, they can't grasp the concept that this crazy, well, maybe crazy's a little hard, but he was definitely not balanced. A man like Oswald could sit up there, take these 3 shots, and take out the President of the United States. It's absurd. Mailer's right. It's absurd. But it happened. You know, my uncle used to say it isn't right, but it's so. And it happened. And people just can't deal with it. So they go down these avenues. I have read, well, according to Posner, I haven't read as many as I thought I've read, but I have read books about the Cubans, and not the Cubans, that Kennedy had feelers out to Castro about making peace. You make peace with your enemies, not with your friends, and that's why he was shot. And then you have the whole business about the Cubans were mad about the Bay of Pigs, and that's why he was shot, and the mob, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's one guy, 24 years old, okay, who was a hell of a shot. Don't ever forget, with all due respect to my Marine Corps heritage, Oswald was a Marine. He was a good shot. He was a sharpshooter. There's 3 classifications of Marine. There's 4, actually. One is you don't qualify. They're not happy with that. The third one is marksman. Second one is sharpshooter. And the top one is what's called expert. Oswald fired sharpshooter when he was on Parris Island in 1959. He's a good shot. And don't forget, this is a nothing shot, okay? The one thing I remember from being, when I was in Dallas, besides the abominable heat, I was there in August of 2004, can you imagine? Lord, was it hot. But the one thing you take from being there when you get out of the car from where you park and you walk out there, besides it being very emotional, for obvious reasons, is how small it is. This is a tiny, tiny little spot. The building over here, which is now a Dallas County office building, to the spot here, the third shot, the headshot, is 265 feet. Not yards, feet. That's 90 yards with a 4-power scope. I'm 62 years old. I shake like a leaf. I can hit that shot today. Oswald was 24 years old and cool as a cucumber. It's not that hard a shot. To me, the issue has never been the shot. To me, the issue is how that crazy bastard get in a building with a rifle. That's always been the thing, my bone of contention. That's the thing that aggravates me, is how did he get in the building? He worked there.
So where did the theory come from that the shots didn't come all from the same direction?
Okay, that's an excellent question. The question was the theory about the shots. Okay, if you see the film Kennedy's assassination is filmed by so many different people at so many different times, not only Abraham Zapruder, different people at different spots. There is a police motorcycle officer directly to the rear of Kennedy, lays his motorcycle down, and goes up the grassy knoll. And the grassy knoll, that's a misnomer. That's not grassy, and that's no knoll. That's a fence. It's a very disappointing when you stand there. That's the grassy knoll, but it's nothing. And I, for a long time, could not understand what happened till you get there. I swear to you, I'm not making this up. I'm standing there where Zapruder was. Zapruder stood on a 4-foot high concrete abutment. I wasn't getting up there. Okay, not happening. I stood next to it. And traffic still runs. Okay, these streets are still used. Okay, and a truck comes around the corner up here. Okay, coming off of Houston on the Elm. And there's a long slope down to the triple underpass. And he downshifted. He didn't even backfire. He downshifted. And I heard the growl. And then I heard the growl. It echoed off the triple underpass. The police officer sitting here got splattered, okay, with the third shot. Got stuff all over him. Okay, take that for a trauma moment. All right. And then the echoes just screwed him all up. And he was the first one. And when he went up the hill, 50 people followed him up the hill. And there's nothing there. There's nothing there. There are eyewitnesses back at the corner standing there looking at Oswald take this shot. Okay? But the confusion, because it's a bowl, it's very hard to describe to you. It's 390 feet from the Texas School Book Depository, which is now our Dallas County building, to the triple underpass. That's just a little bit larger than a football field. And it's like a bowl. The road slopes, you're on a slope, and it's an echo. Everything echoes, and you can't get a good feel for what's happened. And consider the chaos, consider the trauma of the moment. One guy runs up that hill, 50 people follow him, and now we have a conspiracy. The shots are fired from the quote-unquote grassy knoll. And then, of course, you see the Zapruder film, and frame number 313, which is famous and haunted Zapruder for the rest of his life. He was afraid that that would be his legacy, was 313, with the headshot and the things, we don't need to go there, but it's an unusual thing for, he gets shot back here and it blows out, and it's just, and the poor cop gets the stuff all over him. And then, Mrs. Kennedy climbs on the back of the limousine. We've all seen it 1,000 times. But I'm pretty sure it's all an echo chamber. And it can really screw you up. But when that truck downshifted, it was like scales fell off my eyes. It's like I had been there 1,000 times, and I'd never been there. One of those things, you see the Zapruder film, you study this thing, magnificently obsessed, and then you actually stand there. And the first thing that comes to your mind, besides the damn heat, is how small it is. It's so tiny. It's such an easy shot. It's a nothing shot.
I get that impression from
No, you don't. No. Yes, sir.
Doesn't it show that he gets shot from the front, the head goes back?
Now you're gonna get the Oliver Stone back into the rear kind of thing. Okay. Posner does a great job of analyzing the Zapruder film, and this was in '93. Also, since then, there have been enhancements to 8mm film, and that's way past my pay grade. I don't understand what they're talking about, but they've done a tremendous amount of enhancement to the film itself, which actually shows an instantaneous pitch forward of about 4 to 6 inches, okay? And then his chin bounces off his chest because his head's down. After he got shot in the throat, his head's down. And the argument is that oh boy, during lunch I'm telling this story. But the argument is that the shot went through the head and come out the front, okay, pushed the head forward, and had no place to go. So it bounced off the chin. Now, you know what the conspiracy theorists are going to tell you. He got shot from the front, and that's why it goes to the back. That's all on the web. I made a huge mistake Friday. I got on the internet because I knew I was coming here today. I spent 6 hours on the internet. I almost forgot to go down the hall to the little room with the porcelain bowl a couple of times. I mean, there is so much out there now. There's so much stuff. The one guy I was telling you about who swears up and down the Zapruder film was altered, okay? He's the same guy who says there are two other films. There's a Bronson film and a Nix film, NIX, shooting from the other angle, just before the limousine makes the turn. And you can see the building, okay? And then they turn their camera off because the limousine goes down and the president's gone and they don't care. Another 5 seconds, and that would have been, who knows what that would have shown. But they've enhanced this now to the point they swear up and down. You can see Oswald squeezing off the first shot, which misses. The first shot misses and goes down into either the tree or the light stanchion. And then it's the second shot through the throat into Colonie, and the third shot is the kid. Well, funny you should mention that. There's a guy at the Triple Underpass, a guy by the name of Teague, I think his name is, who gets clipped with a piece of concrete. And he's, like I said, 340 feet away. And the theory is that the first shot either clips off the tree or comes off the light stanchion, and a piece of it goes all the way down the street, hits the concrete in front of him, comes up and gets him in the cheek. But the bullet disappears, just disintegrates and disappears. Nobody ever finds the first one. The second one, of course, everybody calls the pristine bullet, which is not pristine. And the third bullet disintegrates and is found, pieces of it are found in the limousine. That's the one with the headshot. But Teague, no, he missed one. He missed the first one. He got anxious, and he fired too soon the first time. I don't know how much of this you want, but they've changed their attitude. For years in Dallas, they wanted to tear the building down and forget about it. They just wanted to forget about it. It happened, and that's it. Of course, as time progresses, they realize that it is historical, and it's something that they have to embrace. They don't want to, but they embrace it. And they have a thing called the 6th Floor Museum. And Dallas County bought the Texas School Book Depository. And the 2nd through the 5th floors are all office buildings. The 1st floor has the ubiquitous bookstore and a cafeteria, and then you get on the elevator and you go to the 6th floor. And the 6th floor is, for want of a better word, spooky. They keep the lights down because they have so many artifacts. It's a museum. It's called the 6th Floor Museum. They keep the lights down because they have artifacts they want to save. And you get in there, and you have to walk from the elevator, you have to walk all the way around, all these exhibits. The Zapruder film runs constantly. They have it on a recurring reel or what, it's like, good Lord, enough. And there are different still pictures, and there's a diorama and the whole thing. And then you get down to the corner. And what they've done is they plexiglassed off where Oswald fired the shots from. And they took the FBI pictures and they recreated it down to the boxes, exactly where he was. I understand there's a webcam you can see the shot that he took now. That's a little much for me. I don't think I'm going there. But it's plexiglassed off. You can't get there. But you can stand to the next window, right there. And you can look out onto the street, and you look, and you just stand there, and it gives you the shivers. I won't deny that. And you just soak it all in, and you just keep saying to yourself, my God, it's a nothing shot. This is nothing. This is nothing. He's 180 feet, the second shot. the one that goes through Kennedy's back, comes out his throat, goes into John Conley. Nothing. And he's 265 feet for the third shot. Oswald was caught in a theater. Oswald, after he leaves the depository, the Texas School Book Depository, he gets on a bus, gets hung up on traffic, takes a cab, goes back to his rooming house where he was staying, and gets his pistol. And he's got his pistol in his belt, and a cop pulls him over. J.D. Tippett pulls him over because he meets the description. I'm telling you, within minutes, they had a description of the guy that fired the shot. He was listed as 5'10", slight build, brown hair. Okay? That was perfect. It was him. Oh, they all saw him. People are standing down below the Texas School Book Depository. And after the limousine goes by, they hear the first shot. Okay? And half of them turn and look at the limousine, and the other half turn and look up, and they see him do it. This is what Posner says. Posner says you have to get past the conspiracy and realize, this was witnessed. This was a witnessed shooting. Yeah, well, he was kneeling. He was kneeling on the boxes.
How do they know how tall he is?
Kneeling on the, he was seen prior to the assassination, about a half an hour before. One guy said to his wife, "Do you want to see what a Secret Service agent looks like? There's one there." Little did he know. Little did he realize. But the description goes out, and Tippett sees Oswald walking and pulls him and asks him some questions. Doesn't like the answers. Gets out of the car, walks around, and Oswald shoots him 4 times. Bang, 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 bang. 4th shot right in the head. Bang. Kills the cop right there. And then takes off, and he walks into a movie theater, doesn't bother to pay for his ticket, so the lady calls the cops. And once they realized, and they jumped him in the theater, and he pulled out his pistol and tried to shoot the cop that was going to arrest him. And he tells a great story of jamming the flesh of his hand down in the hammer. Otherwise, Oswald would have killed him. And then Oswald was forcibly restrained. And if you've ever seen pictures of his mugshots, you know he was forcibly restrained, all right? They beat the crap out of him. So, can I go with the other lady first? Yes, ma'am.
Was it true that after he shot Kennedy, he went down into the lunchroom? And
This is the whole story with Roy Turley that Mr. O'Reilly conveniently forgets. He walks down. He does not drop the rifle, contrary to Mr. O'Reilly. Cool as the other side of the pillow. Walks, stuffs it down, and walks down to the 2nd floor. And he hears the cop and Truly flying up the stairs. Walks in and is seen walking into the break room, putting a quarter in the machine, getting a soda, sitting down. The police officer draws down on him. The whole ticket, who are you, so on and so forth. And it's Truly, the building manager, who says, never mind him, he works here. And they go flying up the stairs, and Oswald just calmly walks out the front door. Walks out the front door.
The day before Kennedy was to arrive in Dallas,
Yes.
the Johnsons owned the newspaper. There was supposed to have been an article of Kennedy's arrival, and it was outlined in black, which in those days was more or less like a death note.
What it was, somewhat. What it was an ad. It was an ad purchased by some, I'll call them right-wing radicals, about the treasonous activities that Kennedy had done by dealing with the Soviets, and that he was betraying his heritage. And it's in black, but it's an advertisement. Okay, it's an advertisement. Now I'm going to go with this lady first. Go ahead.
They mentioned about his back brace is what
Yes,
killed him in the line of fire.
Kennedy was the sickest good-looking man you have ever seen. Okay, he's 46 years old and handsome as the day is long, and according to O'Reilly, very, very active in certain actions. but he was terribly sick. He had Addison's disease. He was taking cortisone. He was taking speedballs, all kinds of things, and he had a back break. He'd had last rites to the Catholic Church at least twice prior to the day he was shot. Once because of surgery on his back, and he had a back brace. They used to strap him into this back brace, and it would just keep his back. And the theory is, if you watch the second shot on the Zapruder film, okay, when Connolly gets shot, the bullet comes through Kennedy's back, comes out his throat, and goes into Connolly. It knocks Connolly right on just knocks him down, drives him into the seat, and Kennedy barely moves. The only thing you see from Kennedy is the famous, hands to the throat. And the theory is that the back brace is holding him up. That normally, that shot would have knocked him over, and he might have survived. Might have survived. Yes. Yes, sir.
Just in defense of Mr. O'Reilly.
Certainly, sir. No problem.
He's an outstanding gentleman, maybe not an historian.
I'm having trouble hearing you. Go
I
ahead.
said that Mr. O'Reilly is an outstanding gentleman, maybe not an historian.
True.
But he's an outstanding gentleman.
No argument there.
And that point right there is one reason why the PT-109 incident did have something to do with his assassination, because, as was said in the book, and you may doubt it, but the first shot probably wasn't lethal. It was the fact that he came back up, and that had something to do with
The first shot is the one that missed. You were talking about the second shot, the first shot that hit Kennedy. Oh, no question. He'd have, like this lady said with the back brace. I'm pretty sure, and doctors have said that he would have survived that shot. And the back brace, holding up from the back brace, is probably what killed him, because he had left a perfect target for the third shot. Now, your argument is good that the whole business with him hurting his back with the PT-109 incident, which sets the scene for further on down the road. I don't quarrel with that. What bothers me about that whole thing, the first 50, 60 pages of the book, the maps and the whole business with the coconut and the whole thing with the being rescued. This is a story that is excellent for a Kennedy biography, okay? But if you're dealing with killing Kennedy, the end of Camelot, that could be summed up in about two pages.
Also, in defense of Mr. O'Reilly,
Fine.
you've heard the saying, don't judge a book by its title.
Absolutely. By its cover.
Yeah.
And by
in
its
this
cover.
case, and that's on the cover. I don't think that he committed to this being an investigation of the assassination. I think what he did is two things. One is he actually arrived at a very similar conclusion as you have, is that Oswald did it. It was a confluence of events. Some nutcase got in a perfect place to the point where they figured he belonged there. And he got an easy shot and killed a great man, and he was basically a loser.
Yes.
But what I think O'Reilly brings out, he brings out a lot of the context of President Kennedy's life and his administration. And just to one case in point is that he makes that case that Kennedy had cheated death several times. And so kind of the way that things balance out, if you will, in the world is so then he gets killed by a nut who's a lucky shot.
Fair enough.
But he still has significance beyond that day in Dallas. John F. Kennedy, although the Democratic Party, I noticed, they don't talk about him that much. They talk about his younger brother quite a lot. But I still think he's the standard by which we judge presidents, because the nation, you remember it, even though you were very young, there was something different about the presidency and the White House when he was there.
Yeah, although no question. The comparison, I'll defend O'Reilly. The comparison that he makes between Eisenhower and Kennedy, and maybe this is not fair to Eisenhower, but he does refer to him as a tired old man, multiple heart attacks, things of that nature. And Kennedy himself, the torch is passed to a new generation. You know the speech. We all know we all know the speech. And the fact that John Kennedy would have been 95 last year is hard to, that's another thing. Talk about these, can't get your hands around the assassination. But I think also one of the things we have to realize about Kennedy is potential. And that's what drives, I don't know if anybody has seen this Stephen King book, 11/22/63. Okay, boy, you talk about orbiting a whole different planet. Stephen King is Stephen King, and I'll just sum that up and tell you there's time travel involved, and I'll leave the rest of it to you. But the whole issue of what might have been, fractured innocence, a brief life. There's a biography of Kennedy called Unfinished Life, and that kind of thing. So I think O'Reilly, you raise a good point. He does address that issue. My argument is still going to be about don't judge a book by its cover. I understand that, but I wish going in, okay, there had not been such an emphasis on the killing of Kennedy. And that doesn't happen for 200 pages. And it's not like I don't know how this is going to end, but I'm like reading this thing and I'm thinking to myself, okay, where are we going with this? What is the purpose of this? And it's adulation. He said the same thing about Lincoln. He idolized Lincoln. And he did the same thing with Lincoln. It took forever to get Lincoln to that theater. And my argument would be then the title, change the focus. But he told USA Today, I'm not a historian, I'm a bloviator. Boy, I had to look that one up. Bloviator means pompous writer or speaker. And I just, what do you say to that? Yes, sir.
One thing that I've never understood, and I wonder if you could shed some light on it, in light of the fact that the assassination had taken place and that everybody, I would imagine, was preoccupied with that at the moment, why would the police be available to go to a movie theater to find out why a man had gotten in without paying his ticket?
They were tracking him down after Tippit had been shot. When Tippit is shot on Oak Street, don't quote me on that, this is in front of witnesses, okay? There are people standing in their doorways. There's a guy on the street. There's a guy in a taxi cab. And somebody runs over and grabs the microphone of the police cruiser and starts screaming. Officer's been shot. This is the guy. I know what the guy looks like, and he went down that way. He went that way. And the next thing you know, he's walking through a used car dealership, peeling off his jacket, and he's holding up the .38, and he's and he's dumping the shells and reloading while he's walking, and then they see him go in the theater, and they just, they lose their minds. And like I said, the description of who was in that window firing those shots was out on the radio, I'd say 15 minutes.
So they weren't going in the theater?
No. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. If I led you to that conclusion, no, that's my fault.
No, you're explaining otherwise.
But the fact that he didn't bother to pay for a ticket, the woman who's sitting at the booth sees him go in, and here comes all these cops. Oh, he's in there. They turn up the lights. They see who he is, and he pulls out his gun. He's going to kill that cop. He's going to kill him right there. This is it, he yells. This is it. Pulls out his gun, and they just jumped him. And then the guy puts his hand. That's remarkable. That story, I've seen that. That's remarkable that he gets his finger down between the hammer and the plate. And Oswald squeezes the trigger, and it hits this instead of squeezing off around and killing. That cop would have been dead right on the spot. And then I don't think Oswald gets out of the theater alive, in 1963. Yes, I'm going to go with the man behind you. Okay, yes, sir?
What's your take on Jack Ruby and his motivation?
Jack Ruby is a case. Jack Ruby is a male groupie of the police department. He owns an entertainment theater. Oh no, he's Jewish. Oh no, Rubenstein. His name is Jack Rubenstein. He shortened it. He owns an entertainment venue. It's a strip club. Okay, And he's always in the police station. Jack's a wannabe. Jack's a wannabe. He's always giving free passes to these guys to come to his theater. He's always buying pizza for these guys. He's not out of place in that police department. He's there. Some of the most bizarre sequences of the Kennedy assassination is when the Dallas Police Department parades Oswald out in front of the press. That's absolutely madness, okay? And they're sticking microphones in his face, and he utters the famous phrase, I'm a patsy, I didn't do anything, and with this big grin on his face, this whole thing, a big scar over his eyes where they beat the hell out of him coming out of the theater. And Ruby is there. You can see him. You can see him in the background, okay? There. On Sunday, when they decide to transfer Oswald from the local police department to the county, okay? And this is nuts. You talk about wrong place, wrong time, that whole business. Oswald is scheduled to be transferred at 11 o'clock. Okay? At 11 o'clock, Jack Ruby is in the Western Union office across the street wiring $25 to one of his girls who needed money. She was somewhere else, Fort Worth, doesn't matter. He comes out of there and he sees all this commotion at the police station. Oswald should have been transferred at 11 o'clock. Oswald whines that he's cold. They wait. They get him a sweater. They take the cuffs off him. He puts the sweater on. They put the cuffs on him. They walk him downstairs, the perp walk, to the car. If he doesn't get that sweater, okay, he's gone before Ruby gets in the police station. Ruby walks in the police station, walks up, is standing there. Oswald comes out with that stupid grin on his face. Ruby gets mad and caps him. And Ruby is firmly convinced that they're going to take him upstairs, pat him on the head, say, Jack, thank you very much, and send him home. And this whole business about Ruby was a hitman for the mob, what they conveniently forget is his dogs. When he drove down to the Western Union office to wire this girl $25, he brought his dogs with him. He loved his dogs. They were his whole life, okay? He left the dogs in the car. Went in, wired her the money, comes out, wonders what all the commotion is, walks across the street. They let him in. He's always there all the time. He's a groupie. Oh, hey, Jack, how are you? Good. Pow. National TV. If Oswald doesn't want that damn sweater, Ruby misses him.
How did he get exonerated?
Well, he couldn't get a fair trial in Dallas. His conviction was overturned. There was a question of his psychiatric status, and his conviction was overturned. He was scheduled to be retried. In the end of '66, he was going to be retried, I guess, early '67 in Wichita, Kansas. They were going to get a fair jury in Wichita, Kansas. The man shot somebody on national TV in front of 40 million people. They were going to get a fair jury. But he died of stomach cancer before he could go to trial. So in the eyes of the law, he's not guilty. He's not guilty. Jack Ruby is not guilty. In the eyes of the law, Lee Harvey Oswald is not guilty because he was never tried. And you and I both know that. Thank you very much.